You don't know what you don't know until someone's willing to be brave enough to show it to you.
Do you have a division between who you are as a business leader and who you are as a spouse, friend, sister, brother, mother, or father? The awareness of the division that exists within you and the roles you play creates space for your inner voice. This inner voice is seeking your attention and hinting there's a better, easier way of leading and being. Today, we're speaking with Alexsys Thompson on the power of a graceful leader, integrating who you are with how you lead, and tribal gratitude.
Welcome to the most exciting adventure of your life. Welcome to a new way of living. And welcome to the Fierce Planet Adventures podcast.
Hi, I'm Andy.
And I'm Casey.
And we're on a mission to inspire and guide 1 million people to live a life of purpose, passion, and self-mastery through the 5 mountains of cutting-edge development and mental fitness.
Alexsys Thompson is the creator of the Tribal Gratitude Journal, a keynote speaker, executive coach, a certified soul language practitioner, and member of the Forbes Coaches Council. Her work is guided by her life's mission to create safe spaces for souls to show up. She specializes in helping leaders step into their greatness by enhancing their strengths, creating strategies to bridge their gaps, and empowering their followers to do the same. Her commitment to clean, concise, and kind candor allows her to easily cut through the noise and find optimal solutions. Because of this ability, she's often described as a breath of fresh air. Welcome, Alexsys.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you.
Great to have you. And we have a tradition with our first question, and you are no stranger to this concept. What are you grateful for today?
I'm grateful for a very sunny day, most of the day today. We've had a lot of rain, which I'm also enjoying, but it was nice to get some reprieve this morning.
Very nice. Your book, which we've been just fascinated by just so much great information, The Power of a Graceful Leader. This was based on your own experience and discovering a disconnect in your own life between how you were leading. Would you mind telling us your story, what led to that awareness?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I think most of us learn things and then we hopefully can relay the learning, right? So the student becomes the teacher at some point in many parts. And I think this is an example of that for me. So as a young person, I have a lot of influencing themes. I can, on my best days, I can influence you in alignment with what it is you want to do. And on some of my worst days, early on in my leadership, I would influence you to do what I wanted you to do. Without a whole lot of thought about what you wanted. So it's kind of the old command and control leadership style that's, hopefully going more and more by the wayside. But that was the model I had growing up. I didn't have a lot. One of my first jobs was in the automobile business. As you can imagine, back in the late 80s, early 90s, there weren't a lot of women in the field then. So I just watched all the guys do what the guys did and tried to mimic a version of that. And as you can imagine, some of it went well and a lot of it went really not so well. So as I evolved in my leadership style and moved from there, and then many years later into more of a corporate role, I had to learn the politics, and that equally wasn't fun or easy, terribly easy for me at the time, because they gave me, here's the results. I was often in a business development or sales role, so the very metrics environment for that.
Right.
And so if you give me the goal, at that point I was just going to go get it done, and I didn't really worry about how. It was just bring home the bacon, baby. And so I was always on the top of the leaderboard because I was good at getting it done. Unfortunately, what I didn't realize at the time in my earlier years of leading, as people came underneath me, was that it was often a train wreck behind me. And so I had a lot of cleanup to do. And as you can imagine, I just wanted to get the way you're measured in sales. It's just, you're only as good as the last thing you brought home, right? So you're constantly moving and hunting and moving and hunting. And there wasn't a big reward system, if any reward system, for developing relationships and, growing talent and all of those things. It was just, how much did you bring in? That I had figured out. But the other parts of it were how to grow young talent underneath me, or how to have really good relationships that were beyond the deal, became a little bit of a struggle. And this is when I fell down many, many times. And it was hard for the system as well because they couldn't reward me monetarily and punish me for what got the reward. It became a conundrum for the systems I was in as well. And I actually had a gentleman, and it's in the book, that saw what was happening, valued me enough to tell me to stop it, and that I needed to find another way, and what resources would I need to do that. After I licked my wounds, because I wasn't good at licking bad, I was good at licking good because I was bringing home the money. I approached him in private, and we had a long conversation. And I shed a few tears, which equally wasn't what you did on the battlefield, you know. But it was a really good learning experience. He, in those moments, was extremely graceful with me, and I appreciated him doing the tough stuff and not just writing me off or allowing the bad behavior.
What struck me, Alexsys, with your story is how much it paralleled my first manager jobs, and the difference there exists between managers in a structure and actually being a leader. And there's a world of difference.
Yes.
In my experiences, okay, check the boxes, get it done. Like you said, bring in the sales. But being able to communicate with the team in an effective, positive way just didn't exist for me when I was starting out. I'm like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. I think that even now, I don't think, because I'm still working in the field, just in a different capacity, I see it all the time. And actually today, one of the conundrums I'm facing as an executive coach inside an organization I've been supporting for a long time is having a really candid conversation with a very senior executive in this organization, because now I have a pattern of 3 of his direct reports all having their version of the same conundrum with him. So he is now officially part of the problem. And it's a blind spot for him. So I in between calls, I'm like, okay, how am I gonna approach this and be gentle and kind with him, right? Because you don't know what you don't know until someone's willing to be brave enough to show it to you. And I think the best way, or I've learned in receiving and offering this opportunity to someone, gentle respect is really required. Because the ego, doesn't want to look bad. Mine either, and you need to, it's helpful if you can allow a space for the ego to just be whatever it's going to be for the moments when it feels a little throttled. So you can create the space for a new conversation. So wish me luck.
Well, good luck.
If anyone can.
Right. If anyone can, you can. You got this. This episode of Fierce Planet Adventures podcast is brought to you by 5 Mountain Coaching, licensed unbeatable mind coaching, integrated accelerated vertical growth across 5 domains of cutting-edge development designed by retired Navy SEAL Commander Mark Devine. Learn the Big 4 skills of mental toughness and resiliency. Discover the 6 pillars of performance. Test your mettle with custom-created crucibles across all 5 domains. Visit 5mountaincoaching.com to schedule your free 1-hour unbeatable mind coaching session. That's the number 5, mountaincoaching.com. Begin your journey to becoming unbeatable today. Blind spots, respect, and having crucial conversations. And that's tough, right? It's tough for a lot of people. What do you think makes it so tough for folks to actually have heartfelt, crucial conversations, whether it's in the workplace or even with like a spouse or a loved one?
This is such a big question, and it's so multi-layered. So I'm going to go right to the root, and then we can come back from there, because I don't know if this language will resonate with everybody. So my theory and practicing hypothesis so far proving itself out is that we all have 1 or 2 very deep core woundings as a young individual in life. And the themes are relatively consistent in humanity, but how they happened and our individual stories and interfaces with them are as unique as we are. And so when we are trying to protect, and I'll be vulnerable enough to say, one of my core woundings is that I often don't feel like I belong, both in my original family of origin, all the way through the family I'm creating here at Ubuntu. That's a demon or internal dialogue that I have to do a lot of self-soothing and self-parenting and all the things to calm that egoic nature down, and to not try to erase it. I mean, it served a purpose at least one point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever any of our, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I don't belong, there's a whole bunch of statements there that people could identify with. And whenever a conversation, a person, a situation gets close to one of those core woundings, there's a whole system of walls and doors and windows and strategies that we have to protect ourselves, right? And oftentimes we don't take the time to update those systems, because what applied when I was 17 didn't apply when I was 35, and certainly doesn't apply at 50. I'm a whole new person. I have different skills. So I'm constantly refining those skill sets so that when those crucial conversations show up, I have both the desire and the skills to enter into the conversation with grace. And this is the entry point for grace. But I will also say to you that did not come naturally to me. I actually am Crucial Conversations certified. I've done all of that heavy lifting in the communication schematics to teach myself how to do that work more often than I don't. But what I will also say again in a vulnerable moment is I'm still human and I still have those core woundings. And it was really ironic that this comes up because this weekend my partner and I were away for a couple of days. And I had a conversation I probably should have had almost 12 months ago with my partner. But there was a very big fear of rejection or not being good enough. And so I set the whole stage saying, hey, I need the most graceful version of you that you can muster in this moment. And if now's not a good time, we're going to postpone the conversation, because anything short of that is going to make me want to just die. Like literally, that's how I felt. Of course, none of that was true, but that's all the, versions of me that were built up into this big spin over the past almost a year that I had going on. Grace, we have good communications. We use Imago dialogue a lot. So it worked out beautifully. But even I, who do this for a living, waited almost a year to have a particular conversation. So this is a constant refining and practice for the rest of your human life.
When I talk to my clients or guests on the podcast, and the neat thing about the podcast that we do is it makes us, I think, better humans when we interact with guests like yourself and learn different techniques, hear different stories. But the thing that keeps coming back to me is, we're all human. And even though we coach in these domains and we help people move past them, that doesn't mean we're free of them. We just find ways to work through them. We use the tools and we have to do the work. And like you said, it's a lifelong process. And I think that's maybe something that can be intimidating for some people is, look, there's some work that needs to get done here. And it's not a one and done situation.
No, that's why I use the word refining. It's constantly up-leveling your systems, your strategies, your toolkit, your network, the people you're hanging with, right? That's equally vibrationally and from a consciousness level. All of those things need to keep evolving. And, I had a conversation with a friend of mine who has a relationship that's fallen to the side. And for 2 decades, that relationship was really pivotal to their growth. And it no longer is. Not that anyone's bad or anyone did anything wrong. It's just no longer serving. That relationship as it was designed isn't really serving either of them. And they both decided they didn't really want to up-level the relationship in the current context. So there's it is layer after layer after layer. I think, or what I'm learning is that it's the commitment to do the work and the commitment to keep realigning to the who that you see yourself being and the deposits that you want to make in the world as you're moving through. And that's literally a lifelong adventure. And it's so rewarding and it's full of magic.
Friends, if what we're discussing today, the 5 domains of cutting edge human development, sounds interesting to you and you want to experience it for yourself, a great place to start is the Unbeatable Challenge. You can try it for free now. There's a link in the show notes, and it's a great way to really jumpstart your 5 domain training and become really clear on your goals for this year and how to crush them. We did this challenge earlier this year, and it was a great way to find clarity and redefine our mission, our purpose, And Casey and I also used it as an alignment piece in our marriage to make sure that we were on the same page. So the link is in the show notes. You can try it for free now. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. Take action. The energy, I think, that's within us when we have this fear of beginning these crucial conversations that are necessary is very draining. And once, just think about when you let go and you have that the courage to have that conversation, and it goes much better than you thought it was. How do you feel? You just feel so much more lifted and positive. Even if the conversation wasn't necessarily a positive one, you mustered some courage, and that's a big win.
Yeah, it is a big win. And I think if you can, how I try to picture it is when that fear leaves my body, because I'm moving it out of my body into the world to be experienced however it's going to be experienced. All of a sudden I have more room literally to embody the thing that's more uplifting and more joyful than that particular fear was. So it's usually extremely rewarding, not always easy.
For our listeners, what would be one or two prompts that they could use to begin a crucial conversation? You know, you shared the one that you just used, but are there a few others you might be able to share?
Absolutely.
I think so many people have a hard time actually taking that first step.
Yeah. So here's a couple of really powerful ones if you're willing to engage. One is, most of the time when we're in that black and whiteness of right or wrong, good or bad, whatever judgment we're placing on ourselves, the other person, the situation, if we can drop out of judgment and instead replace it with curiosity and ask really curious questions of the situation and of ourselves, we can get to a place where there's another possibility, at least one other possibility. And so oftentimes a really good inquiry is to just ask yourself, well, why would a good and decent person, being you and or the other party, behave like this? And once you do that, you're like, oh, okay, well, their dog could have got run over this morning. You know, their mom could be ill. You can just go on and on and on. And then all of a sudden, all the judgment you have starts to kind of crumble down, because now you become curious about, why is this happening, right? We fabricate stories within nanoseconds. And unfortunately for most of us, we don't have the framework and the practice of fabricating the most positive story. It's usually the most negative story. Mm-hmm. So this is one to suspend that possibility for something else to show up. Another one is, this is one I start with all the time, because I can feel in my body now, and I know in my body where certain types of fear are housed. And so I'll just ask my body, okay, what is it you need from me right now? Do you need space? Do you need to move forward? And then seek permission for either of those things from the other party. So because it's normal for anyone to go into fight or flight mode, but there's a lot of stuff that can happen in between either one of those. If you can just take a deep breath, pause, and be still for a minute, and make the inquiry to ask your body, okay, what is it I need right now? And that's another way to kind of have a pattern interruption in reaction.
Nice. Thank you. Yeah, that's powerful. Pause, breathe, think, act.
Yeah.
Great. You know, I kind of took us off on a tangent a little bit into crucial conversations. Sure. And I don't think we were quite done yet with graceful leadership. So I wanted to bring us back to that. Casey?
You talk about honesty being such a crucial piece of being a graceful leader, but namely being honest with yourself. What exactly do you mean by be honest with yourself, and why is that so important?
Because I think most of us are asleep at the wheel 90% of the day. And so if you're willing to be honest with yourself about that possibility, then you can get back to curiosity, which then opens up new conversations. And I'm not saying I don't sleep sometimes during the day. I mean, not literally. I don't have the opportunity typically, but I can move through certain activities and then go, where am I? What's the time? And it's not always a flow thing. Sometimes it's a distraction, dissociative behavior. And so I find that the being honest with yourself is actually an intentional practice for me, and I do it once a month. So I have a regular cadence to it, where I will sit down and I will this is how I do it. I make it very simple. I pull up my calendar and I go, did I spend my time how I wanted to spend my time to yield the things that I said I was up to in the world? Oftentimes it's not all yes.
Mm.
Okay. And so then I'll look at, I'll celebrate the places where I'm like, yeah, I nailed it. And I'll be like, good job, Lex. And then the areas where I didn't, I kind of dig in a little bit and I ask myself, what got in the way? Was it, I didn't have the support that I needed? I wasn't being who I needed to be. I wasn't being a healthy version of myself, emotionally, physically, or not mentally. And then those are the places I'll spend some more time kind of digging into what got me out of alignment. That's usually what it is. And typically for me, I know my patterns by now. So I will often see that I passed a judgment and it was so unawake, the judgment, like, so it was in my subconscious that I had a belief system laid on the judgment that I acted within, and it was out of alignment. And I go, oh gosh, how did that get away from me? But immediately once I'm aware of it, I go back and I clean it up. So if it was with somebody else, I mean, it's not unlike some of my friends now are like, oh, is it the 16th of the month? Because I'll call them and say, hey, you know, the conversation we had 3 weeks ago, I'm really sorry. Here's what I intended. Here's what came out. And so a couple of friends that I mess up with pretty frequently because I'm a little lackadaisical in those relationships, they'll be like, oh, it's the 16th, there's Lex calling. But I'm always cleaning it up. That's the part, because those piles of lack of cleanup become a lot of debris. And before you know it, you can't open the door to your house because there's so much crap sitting in front of it that you haven't been removing and purging.
Oh, yeah. What a great analogy too.
Right.
I always think about the friends that, you know, out of sight, out of mind, that you forget to text or send that letter, and then 2 weeks go by, you're like, well, heck, what's the point now? It's just embarrassing. So you just push it aside, but it always comes back at some point going, I should have reached out at that point, or whatever the case was. So, wow, so relatable.
You know, do you find that when you take those actions and you go back to clean up, it builds another layer of trust, strengthens the bond in that relationship even more?
So in my inner circle, for sure, because those relationships are built on that kind of an activity all the time. I'll also share with you that when I started this practice, there were some people I couldn't handle it. Like the amount of transparency and integrity and honesty that I was requiring in that relationship meant the relationship wasn't going to be sustainable because the other person didn't want to engage at that level. And that's a unintended consequence of really being in alignment. If you think about living really cleanly as best you can, and then you have all of these people around you that's not their calling for whatever reason, it's not bad, it's just not their thing, you start to sleeve the schluff off of the people that don't want to. They would rather just not talk about it or let it go or sweep it under the rug. And you don't get away with that in my world. You can't really be in my world and have that as a mode of operando because it doesn't work here. So it feels heavy for some people until they get used to it, I think.
Yeah, it's probably not it's not something that I think most people are used to, right? You know, as a society, we just kind of like, yeah, nothing to see here, keep on, move along. Yeah. You know, what's on TV. But what also struck me there is, you know, we're responsible for the words that we choose, but we're also responsible for how our message lands. And that's where you brought it back to cleaning it up, coming back and talking to that person to make sure that you guys were in alignment and everything was okay. That's great.
Or if you're not, right? There's times where you're not. And to have that conversation, and then you do the next thing the relationship requires. And sometimes it's letting go of the relationship, either for that moment, that project, that topic, or altogether.
Trying to identify some of these things that we can clean up, especially going back to the workplace, depending on the culture environment, soliciting honest feedback can be pretty difficult. What suggestions do you have for getting honest feedback or really trying to figure out how you're showing up?
Yes, that's a really good question. And I'm just thinking of a client that nailed it, but it took him 3 years. So the first thing is you have to make a commitment. I'm really serious, because trust at those levels sometimes is, you know, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in spread. We're talking about education spread. We're talking about a lot of things that make me not like you.
Mm-hmm.
And so when that happens, the leadership team has got to be in the long game. You cannot be in the short game and make this work. And most leadership isn't even around to play the long game, much less be committed to the long game.
If you've been listening to our podcast or following us on socials, it's probably no surprise to you that I've been dealing with back issues for many years. And I want to take a moment just to tell you about something that I found that's helped me with my flexibility and durability and mobility. And that's called Kokoro Yoga, somatic warrior training. It's not just yoga. It also includes Tai Chi, Qigong, visualization, meditation, and breathwork practices such as Fit Warrior, Fighting Warrior, which incorporates functional fitness and some martial arts movements. And it's been just a really great way for me to maintain some flexibility and durability as I move through our challenges when we go and do Spartan races and climb mountains. So if this sounds like it's something that could help you out, check it out. The link's in the show notes.
But those leaders that do commit to the long game, I will tell you, and I have evidence for the client just last week, magic happens, because they went from having the town hall, the talking head, right, and all the employees go to figuring out in this virtual world how to break that up in bite-sized pieces for consumability, first of all, and then to be so completely transparent in the being that they are, right? And that's not hard. That's really hard work for a leader, because it requires a vulnerability and an appropriate level of vulnerability, not just puking on people either, right? So they have to figure out the situational awareness of this. This is where grace comes in the infinity symbol, and plant themselves there steadfast enough that they can build trust, but still be able to blow in the wind a little as they get more data. So you have to be able to have flow inside the structure, and then you can create a communication strategy that meets the people where they are. And when you do that, they come to meet you where you are. And so we got to see a lot of feedback come in from that experience that was relevant, and it wasn't easy to ask, and it was really hard to answer, but everybody was committed to the truth of the situation they were in there. And new leaders, a new senior leader that takes on a new job has they have like a 60-day moment in that job that will never come back to really show up vulnerable and clear and set that tone, and then get in that practice, and then they can kind of fast track it. But if you've been in the role or in the company for a long time, that can be really challenging, because now you've got to show up differently, and people got to figure out, is this for real? Are you really going to stick around? This old adage, we'll just wait. There'll be a new leader. I'll be fine. So there's a lot of dynamics to it. Yeah.
A couple of thoughts, harkening back to what Casey asked, is one of the things that I've experienced so many times in different roles, especially when I was really young and just starting out in the workforce, is this mentality of us versus them, yes. Labor versus management. And quite honestly, for a while, I bought into it. I'm like, yeah, that's just the way it is, right? The unions, and don't get me wrong, there's a place for unions, but what if we were able to break down that thought process and meet in the middle, as you suggested? How much better could our work life be, and how much more profitable could it be? It just seems to me now, after years of perspective, is that just it's a no-brainer.
Like, for us to look at it and say that it's really, really true, that it is a no-brainer. It just requires some conscious intentionality on rinse and repeat, right? So that builds trust. The dilemma, though, I've seen so many times, is that you can get a leader or a group, a region that buys in and starts making movement towards that, but the structure that region lives within is rigid, right? So when I get into an organization and support people in that space, I help them understand that typically there's definitely lots of rain here, but one of two things typically in some version or another happens. One, their vibration becomes so profound that the light that they're emitting actually draws everyone else to them. That's one option. That's the ideal, right?
Right.
But there is another thing that can often happen, is that the vibration gets so loud that it shatters the system. And the system doesn't know how to respond. So now you have a broken system, and you have a region or a faction of the system functioning at a pretty high level, and typically that high level will spin off because this housing unit is cracked, but it's not going to bend or migrate with this piece. So when you watch startups that come out of a larger bubble, that's often what's happening is their vibration and hum got too high and the container couldn't hold it anymore and it created a crack.
Interesting.
And yeah.
Is there a structure that this works better in, or maybe a different way to ask this is it scalable? Does it work better in smaller, medium, or large, or is it across the spectrum?
I do think there's some scalability to it. And when you study groups and social norming and everything, there seems to be like 150 seems to be a head count that most good leadership teams can have great influence with, be embedded within without micromanaging, being macro and micro living together pretty harmoniously. But I mean, if you think about most companies, there are hundreds of thousands of people. Let's just take a 10,000 people business. That's not a huge business, but it's a good size business. But if you bunch them out in groups of 150, that looks unmanageable. So you really have to, it's helpful if you could be really intentional that your pods of 150 are fitting inside another pod. Now the dilemma, what happens here is we end up siloing people. And so this becomes the antithesis of the whole thing, because you have leaders. The science is out that one person who's leading can't be effective with more than 12 people, direct reports, and that's even a lot of people, right? So if that's the case, as you look at scalability, it inevitably in our current work structures does this, which is the antithesis, because you actually want it to go like this. So, and inverting it looks easy, right? Just flip the picture over. But when you think about the structures inside, you go, well, if I just invert it, then doesn't the bottleneck just go down? And there is some of that, but there's a really nice structure that you can create inside from a culture and communication strategy. And don't even worry about the org chart, right? If you can get those two things right, where communication can flow freely, then you have a fighting chance. But it's a big challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. This is kind of tangential, but have you found certain tools that work better than others in the flow of communication? And I guess where I'm going with this is, in some organizations I've worked with, they have 5 or 6 different communication tools. There's your email, there's the Slack channel, there's the text message, there's the bulletin board or the web page that where posts are. And it almost seems like communication is so spread out that you don't exactly know where to go to get the fastest or newest up-to-date message.
Yeah. So, especially with the 2020 behind us and still with us in a lot of ways, everyone had to kind of figure some of that out in new and different ways. And one of the really good things that I think that came from that, if a company was willing to embrace it, is the use of video. You don't need heavy technology anymore. You can drop it in a minute. You can go live or not live. So that sounds wonderful, but if your messaging isn't succinct, it can be actually the opposite of wonderful. So a lot of times when we're working as executive teams, we pick 3 channels of communication. We say to the organization, this is the type of communication that's going to come this way. This is the type that's going to come this way. And this is the type that's going to come this way. And we stick to it so that people can trust that that's the truth of the matter. So if you're just looking at a policy update that people should be aware of, but it's not time sensitive, that might be one channel. But if you're trying to create culture shift, it might be in another channel. But usually 3 is just a really good number. So people can usually keep track of 3. They can realize this kind of information goes in 3 different buckets. When you get over 5, it seems to all fall apart.
I bet. Yeah. So I want to make a transition here into tribal gratitude, and also maybe share experiences, Casey, with what you're doing here too. So why is gratitude, in your opinion, so important today?
So I don't it's such a simple statement, and it comes with the simpleness of it comes with a lot a lot of universal truth in my opinion. So when you have a foundation of gratitude, every other thing in your life starts to fall into practice, starts to fall into a place. I'm not saying it all gets better and you win the lottery. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that when you look for what's right in the world, both in your own life, outside of you, the community around you, in your organization, all those things, while not ignoring what isn't working. This isn't a Pollyanna approach, but you start with what's right and then you handle what isn't right through the lens of what is right. Everything shifts in your own internal planet. When you shift your own energy source, you actually have a huge impact on the energy source for all the rest of us. And the universe is true. If you start with everything that's wrong, right, and you look at everything from that lens, you have the tanking experience on all of us. So once I realized that the power both in my own life, well, then when I started to understand the energetic exchange of humanity and actually all things are energetic, I decided I wanted to be a beacon for let's look at what's right and deal with what's not working, because that was a lot better place to originate from. And I wanted to hang out with cool people that were approaching the world that way. I found innovation was working at a much more rapid pace. Health was better. Happiness and joy were better. Manifestation, that's just a byproduct of gratitude practice. So I just went with why not? Like, why would it didn't make sense anymore to choose anything other than that for me. So when I did that, and I'm an executive coach, I sent people a journal, a really nice one, but it was full of empty pages. And you all know that leaders' biggest complaint is resources, mostly their time. So they were like, yeah, this is great. I'm not going to do it. What's next? It's like, oh, okay. And I knew to get into their heart center, which is where I do most of my coaching, I needed to unlock it. We can all stay up here all day long and you'll solve this many problems. But if you can get into the heart center and to bring the intellect with it, you can do all the things, right? So I developed the gratitude journal to be like a 10-minute hit in the morning and a 6-minute hit at night. And people started to see huge, huge differences after 30 days. So that's how that got born. And then, I wasn't expecting to use it other than with my clients, but a friend put a Facebook ad on one day and they all sold in 33 days. So we were like, oh, this might be something.
There may be
That's
something
amazing.
to that.
Yeah.
Such a powerful practice. I know with ourselves, when we started doing a gratitude journal practice, it really solidified a lot of the other internal work that we were doing.
Yes.
Just doing the positive self-talk, loving myself, forgiving myself. These things became not so insurmountable concepts when we started practicing gratitude on a regular basis.
Yeah.
It's an opening of some channel, it feels like.
Yeah.
What does a powerful gratitude practice look like to you?
Yeah. So a powerful gratitude practice is multidimensional. So we talk about a journal, and I think that's a great way to get started. And I think it's a great practice. If journaling is kind of your thing, I love pencils and paper, so I enjoy it. But sometimes I want to break from that too. I'm like, oh, I got to sit down and do my journal. As soon as I have that feeling, I'm out, right? So I do it in my meditation practice pretty consistently in the morning. But one of my favorite things to do is to take a gratitude walk. I have the blessing. I did it before living here. It's just more fun living here. I'm living in the mountains in Vermont. And so I'll get out in the morning with my cup of coffee and I'll just walk around and say good morning to the trees, to the hedgehog, to the chickens, to the raspberries, to the snap peas, to all the things. And when you start to acknowledge the energy that's in those things, something happens. I don't pretend to have a really there's science behind it. You can head over to the Greater Good Center in Berkeley. They can explain the science. But when you say good morning to a snap pea and you thank it and then you eat it, it's so much better. Like at a very cellular level, that gratitude practice not only is something that was in you, that you pushed out into the world, and through that intake again and embodiment, you got it all back like tenfold. So gratitude walks for me are my most robust way, and nature is my best teacher. I think there's lots of other things that could be teachers for people. That just happens to be my best teacher.
Definitely agree. We also find a lot of that quietude in nature and find that we're a lot more comfortable there
Yeah.
and can find answers to solutions. And it's a lot easier to get out of the mind space.
Yes, I agree with
into
you.
your heart.
It just takes a gratitude practice that's cerebral. It's not that it doesn't yield anything, because it does. And when I learned to bring it down into my body and experience through all the senses that I have and am developing, right, new ones every day, it just got like, I can feel it in my fingers. I can feel it in literally in my heart chakra. All of the places where energy is exchanging in and out of my body, I'm experiencing that practice. And I would say that people feel that in me. Like, I've gotten a lot of feedback around, there's just a buzz around you. And I'm like, yeah, it's my gratitude practice. And I'll just, whoa, and they're like, whoa, okay, that's a lot.
What about the power of gratitude for changing a perspective of what most people would consider a negative situation or very challenging situation?
I learned a really good lesson here because when I first started studying gratitude a long time ago, I found that there was this interesting place where there was a collision between grief and gratitude. So a lot of people would write a book or tell their story about their gratitude practice after having come through some tremendous grief. And I was just like, wow, okay, do we have to have grief to have gratitude? Like, I really got into that space, and I interviewed a fair amount of authors about this. And so what seems to happen is that the gratitude practice, I think of it kind of like your life preserver. Like, you might have had one, maybe it was through your faith system, or you actually did write thank you letters to people or whatever. You have an episode in your life, whatever is creating the grieving process for you. And you go to some pretty dark places through a grieving process, right? And you can get stuck in places if you don't know how to move that energy through you. Most of us didn't ever learn that. And then somewhere this thing called gratitude was like this little Tinkerbell light that came in that darkness, and you're like, what's that? Right? And in that grieving process, you just follow the little, like a firefly in June, right? You follow it, and you're like, where are you going? This is so interesting. And then through that curiosity again, right, the awe of a child, you go, oh my God, this bug's butt is lighting up. And look what I can see when it's doing that. And then look what I can see when it's doing that. And then all of a sudden, this thing called hope creeps in. Where there was no hope, this little beacon of gratitude can turn into this big, like sunshine globe of the possibility of hope. And that's what I found so many of these authors, common thread was, by gratitude offered hope in my deepest despair. And I think that's a pretty beautiful option, you know? I'm really careful with people when it's usually death of something that this comes up with. It could be egoic death to the death of a loved one, and anywhere in between. And they'll say, but I can't ignore, for example, a friend of mine's mother just passed away. I can't ignore that my mom isn't here. I'm like, no, you're not supposed to. She goes, well, I can't just make it good. I can't just be grateful for all the great times right now. And I go, don't. You have to allow yourself the space of being sad and mad and angry and hopeful, and back to sad and mad and angry and hopeful. It's part of the human experience. And gratitude's just the thing. It's just consider it the life preserver that makes it so you don't drown in the darkness, you know?
That's beautifully put. Oh, I just got chills.
Everything we've talked about here is interconnected. The power of a graceful leader, gratitude, crucial conversations, they all inform each other and they all support each other. And I've taken us off on a couple different trails as we're talking here. So is there anything that I've missed that you want to let our listeners know about, that you want to talk about? I don't want to, I want to make sure that we offer you that space.
Oh,
I'm not quite sure.
I appreciate that. And I enjoy going wherever I have a complete faith that all of our spirits are going where we need to go. So I guess if you ask me if there's one thing I would share with you, there's 6 tenets. And I think if you were to explore the one called compassionately powerful, there's a place in there where you use that with you. A leader, of course, is using it with all their peoples, right? And all their systems. But it has to start with you. And so often our internal dialogue with ourselves, we wouldn't have with our worst enemy. And so if you can sit inside the stillness, get to nature, get somewhere where you can quiet this and drop into your heart, and just ask yourself gentle questions. What am I struggling with? What am I afraid of? What am I excited about? What am I hopeful for? What limiting beliefs do I have? Can I upgrade them? Can I get rid of them? What help do I need? Am I brave enough to ask for it? And just be in that gentle inquiry with yourself and be compassionate but powerful. Hold yourself accountable. Don't try not to let yourself scapegoat too much and throw it on Johnny or Joe or whatever, right? Own all of the things that are you and just be gentle. If you do that enough, your spirit and soul will just pop right up with every answer you've ever needed because you have all the answers. It's all inside you already. This is just an unlocking mechanism. And in one of my meditations that I love doing, I got really good at putting a lot of my emotions in this really big metal filing cabinet, and it was labeled and organized. But if I didn't have a feeling I liked, I just went to the drawer, opened it, stuffed the feeling in, shut the drawer, and I was done. Through this practice, I can now go in and say, okay, I'm ready to handle this one. This is the one I'm going to handle. This event, this feeling, this whatever. And every time I do that, I create more room and space for myself and someone else. And it's worth doing.
So I want to be mindful of your time. And also thank you so very much for sharing today, because I think this was just an amazing conversation. Where can people find out more about you, what you're doing? And I think, so the gratitude journal, is that available again, or is that done? But also I think you've been offering, if I'm not mistaken, a gratitude practice, or what is it, 10-day, Casey? Or is it?
It's a month. Yeah.
Month. Okay.
30-day.
Yeah. So you can go to Alexsys Thompson, and it's spelled funny, but it's Alexsys Thompson.com, and Ubuntu, Ubuntu, a safehaven.com. That's where the store is if you want to buy the journal. Power of Graceful Leaders on Amazon. So that's easy to do. And all the courses and challenges will be on the Ubuntu, a safehaven.com. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. Appreciate you.
Thank you for everything you guys are doing.
Friends, if you found the Fierce Planet Adventures podcast helpful, please consider leaving a 5-star review on iTunes or your podcast platform of choice. It helps others find our podcast.
If you screenshot your review and tag us on Instagram, we'll send you a classic Fierce Planet Adventures sticker. For your water bottle, cooler, car, send us a direct message with your mailing address on Instagram, and we'll send you that sticker right out.
Thanks for joining us, and live fiercely.